You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hello everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Welcome into another edition of Inside Automotive right here on the CBT Automotive Network. 2021 was a robust and profitable year for many dealers and OEMs, despite the industry shortages. But as automakers continue to scale back on rebates and incentives for consumers in this new year, how profitable does that leave the dealer? On today's show, we're pleased to welcome Rusty West, who's president, CEO, and co-founder of MarketScan, to talk to us about rebates and incentives in the automotive industry today. Rusty, thanks so much for joining us once again on the show.
No, thanks for having us. It's great to be back in Atlanta.
Sure, it's great to be person to person, right? We do so much over Zoom and otherwise, but nothing like being in the studio.
Yeah,
right?
I've gotten to the point where I close my eyes and I see the Zoom logo and we're on them so much. So it is very nice to get out of the office.
Yes,
so.
That's right. So we do hear a lot about incentives and rebates and them dialing them back and in some cases pushing them forward depending on the models that they want to sell. But obviously cars are so scarce right now. That's going to be changing in 2022. As we know, the vehicles will at least start coming back into showrooms and onto lots. It looks like it's not going to be till 2023 that we're maybe full capacity, with vehicles that'll be sent to dealers. So what trends have you seen in rebates and incentives throughout 2021 that are worth noting?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? The rebate offerings that are out there from the different manufacturers have been almost perfectly linear in a steady decline.
Right.
And the volume or the dollar amount that's available for the rebates on different vehicles is almost parallels the inventory levels, right? So as the inventory levels have gone down,
sure,
the rebate levels have gone down as well.
Right.
So it's been pretty interesting. What's really weird is the only segment that went up in the last quarter was the eco vehicles, the EVs and the plug-in hybrids. There was an uptick in rebates available for them.
Yeah, that's interesting because here we are headed into an EV environment here with every manufacturer now announcing that by 2032 or 2035 or whatever it is, we're going all EV, right?
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to see what happens with those OEMs trying to get consumers into the cars, and I think tax incentives and rebates and such will play a big role in that, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Sure. So why do you think that we've seen such a decline in rebates and incentives?
Lack of inventory.
Yeah.
They don't have to put money on the hood to sell them.
Right.
This is. I think if a few years from now, we're going to look back and we're going to see this whole era as being maybe the very best educational example of the dynamics of the laws of supply and demand.
Right.
And it's just a play, right? So vehicles are scarce. There's lots of savings, lots of consumer demand. It doesn't cost as much to sell a car. Dealers are making more money. The manufacturers are having to spend less in order to be able to sell the vehicles.
Yeah. So conversely, they're also saving money and making more money per vehicle than ever before as well, right? Because they're not giving away thousands of dollars in incentives.
For sure they're spending less on rebates, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the rebate amounts per vehicle have dropped, right? And then obviously the volume of vehicles has dropped just because they're not out there. Yeah. So, mathematically it's a less of a spend.
But you feel confident that we're going to see that all of the rebates and incentives coming back in as inventory start to rise, right?
Makes sense. It's old habits are hard to break, right? I don't think we're anywhere near that era where we're going to have a Tesla model for everybody where you order the vehicle you want, it shows up, right? There's too much brick and mortar, there's too much investment in the dealership community to where they have to have vehicles in stock and they have to be able to continue to sell and service those products. So when the laws of supply and demand flip, right?
That's right.
And we burn through this weirdness that we're in right now, and then we've got a bunch of vehicles on a lot.
Sure.
Then we're going to have to do something to sell them. So.
Do you think that OEMs will take notice to what we're going through and what they're going through to say, hey, maybe a dealership can survive very well, make a lot of money on a 30-day supply of vehicles or a 45-day supply of vehicles versus a 3-month, 4-month, some cases 5-month supply of vehicles that they're sending to dealers in 2018 and 2019, right?
Yeah,
I think they've learned the lesson.
Well, and I think the dealers have too, right? Because if you've got if you've got the right number of vehicles on the lot to meet the demands of your consumers, and you're not bloated, you either don't have all your money tied up, or you're not spending a fortune on flooring.
That's right. That's right.
So, because flooring costs not cheap, even though interest rates are low, it's still, you got a bunch of inventory. You're writing a pretty big check every month just to have those cars on the lot.
And it entices the customer and the dealer to run around town to all these, if you're a Toyota dealer, you're going to run as many Toyota stores as you can to work that deal. As they say, it's a race to the bottom, and every dealer wants to win that customer over and win that deal. And the customer, after a while, they get fatigued and they're like, wait, why can't I just walk into a Toyota dealership and buy the car at this dollar amount and not feel like I got ripped off because the next Toyota dealer would have sold it to me for $2,000 less than that because they have 29 of them in stock. They've got a 4-month supply of that car, right?
Yeah, once you buy something, stop shopping because you always find something cheaper, right?
That's exactly right. So true.
I learned that lesson too many times.
Yes, me too.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah.
I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see how it plays out. But
I know. So, how are rebates and incentives actually determined? And I know from where you sit at Market Scan, you work with thousands of dealers and so many OEMs and captives and such, and do an incredible job for your clients. But how are they actually determined?
Yeah, so that's very interesting, right? So you've got JD Power, PIN Network, you've got Urban Science, you've got Experian. They all have massive data sets on the transactions that have happened down to a highly granular level, right? Every zip code, every demographic, every vehicle, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And the manufacturers have teams of people, very, very bright people, who sit there and throw all kinds of analytics at that data set and try to figure out, okay, well, what happened? What happened 45 days ago, 50 days ago, however old it is, right? And what modifications would we have made in order to move the needle back then or buy the business for essentially the right price? And it's kind of flawed, but it's... Yeah.
And I know that you guys are always working on things in your lab there at Market Scan and coming up with some innovative products, one of which that we talked about. And I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here or not, but talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you're working on to help in this area.
Yeah, so we think that it's super important, especially in today's climate, right? Consumers are much more prone to shop online for everything, right? And especially cars now.
That's right.
5 years ago, it was, well, I don't want to quote payments online. Now, if you're not quoting payments online, you're not getting business.
That's right. That's right.
So
they're passing you right by.
Exactly. So we think that it's super important to say, look, we need to look at the industry through the eyes of the consumer, right? If we're going to influence consumers' behavior, we need to know what they see, and we need to think about, okay, if I was a consumer, what would make me engage, right? And $100 a month higher car payment for a comparable vehicle that I can get from your competitor isn't going to get me to engage, right? So when we look at the process that they're doing right now, it literally is kind of the highest evolution of a process of analyzing historic data, right? And we think that's kind of a flawed approach because this is what happened. It's not what can happen, right? And so
you're always trailing. You're always trying to play catch up. Right.
And we were talking about it, right? I'm a car junkie, right? So I'm always getting in and out of different stuff. But I don't think in the history of consumers there's ever been a consumer that says, "Gosh, I wonder what the national average rebate is on this particular vehicle and how that's going to impact every."
No, never heard that before.
No, they want to know how much it's going to cost them to get in the car and how much they're going to pay every month and how long the commitment's going to be.
That's right.
And that's what's going to influence their behavior. How much up front, how much a month for how many months. So if we're analyzing the market in real time, what's going on now, as opposed to what happened back then.
That's right.
It's it's like returning to the scene of the crash to figure out what went wrong.
That's right. Especially with the industry and the market changing so drastically. Not it used to be month to month, but now it's week to week, if not some cases day to day. Right? So that can really take a lender or an OEM and really mess their objectives up and their whole plan.
Oh, of course.
If they're doing that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, right now it's a goofy time, right? Because there's not all that much inventory. But it's the perfect time to kind of plan your attack, right? It's the calm before the storm. And there's a few progressive OEMs out there that we've been working with that are really taking a step back, and they've adopted that philosophy that doesn't matter how we see the outside world, that doesn't matter. It's how the outside world sees us.
Yeah, very good.
And when they're looking at it through that optic,
Yeah.
their approach for how to structure their programs is completely different.
Yeah.
And it's way more efficient. They're literally buying the business for the exact right price.
Right. Right. Especially when they got that mouse in their hand, and they're just a click away from going, no, I'm not getting the information that I need, right?
Yeah.
And they move on.
Yeah.
And so we in the industry have to be that much better and have the necessary data right up to the minute that goes, here's the best deal on that particular vehicle for the OEMs as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's tough because there's a lot of highly funded lending institutions out there. You get Ally Financials and U.S. banks. They got massive amounts of money,
right? And
they're very, very aggressive on certain vehicles, certain segments of the market. The ones that they want in their portfolio. So if we're trying to position if I'm an OEM and I'm trying to figure out what's my rebate spend need to be to compete against a particular vehicle.
Right.
If I'm only looking at the captive lender on that vehicle and there's another lender that's gobbling up all the business because they're more aggressive, then I'm gonna miss the mark. I have to look at what's the landscape like. What does the consumer see?
That's right.
When they go to buy this vehicle, what are they getting quoted? On the online, through digital retailing efforts on the dealer's website, when they come into the store. What's the consumer see? Because if I want the consumer to see my payment right, I need to make sure I structure it in a manner where it's attractive.
And not just on that particular car, but anything competing in its class.
Every trim.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff you guys are working on now, right? To help in that area.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's very exciting. Could a new way of calculating rebates help improve dealer profitability, overall?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things that we are kind of predicting, right? And we don't know how far out it is. A lot of it just kind of depend on when inventory hits.
Sure.
But we're predicting literally an exponential increase in the complexities of rebates and incentives, especially on the conquest sales stuff, right? So if the manufacturers really get that right, then they'll be able to compete against a bunch of different vehicles for the right price, as opposed to be over competitive on some and under competitive on others, because they find a middle ground for a rebate or whatever.
Right.
So if they do that and they get it right, then the dealership's going to be in a position where they are more competitive against more vehicles. Right? And if they are, then they should earn some of that business, more of that conquest business.
That's right.
And that part we're looking forward to. So.
Yeah. And it really all boils down from the consumer standpoint, and for the dealer for that matter. When you're working a deal and you're a desk manager, F&I, leasing manager, what have you, you're just looking for that best payment that's going to win the deal and make you the most money. Right? You don't care who the bank is. You don't care who the lending institution is. You don't care if it's a captive or if it's some outlier or what have you, as long as they'll cash the contract, right? And the money's good.
Yeah.
There's maybe no recourse assigned with it, but that's why it is so vitally important to have that data at your fingertips that's in real time.
Absolutely, and that's why dealerships are signed up with more than just a captive lending institution, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's all over the map, right? There's lending institutions that specialize in subprime, right? And then obviously you've got the lending institutions who specialize in prime, and depending on your franchise, there might be 3, 4, 5 lending institutions that are super aggressive on your products.
Yeah.
And super aggressive doesn't mean that they're $3, $4, $5 a month cheaper than the captive. Nobody cares about $3, $4, $5 a month.
Right.
But when it's $50, $75, $100 a month difference,
that's a differentiator.
Especially on a $300 or $400 a month car.
That's right.
It's 25, 35% difference in the monthly payment.
That's right.
That's the determining factor whether a consumer says, yes, I'm going to do this, or no, I'm not.
That's right.
And
the other thing too is, and I've been in that situation before too, as when I'm desking a deal or I'm a sales manager, you go out and you present the numbers, and they say, really? Well, I just left your competitor, and they can do it for $80 a month less, right? Same car.
Sure.
And you look like a bum because you're sitting there, and you're looking at it going, I don't have that much of a deal here. I got a $1,500 front. I'm making a little bit on the back, and how did this happen? If I went right to retention or whatever, if I blow out any profit, I'm still going to be $25 a month, $30 a month.
And bravado takes over and says, they're lying to you. If they'll do that deal, go buy it right now.
That's a danger.
And the best part is when the consumer stands up and walks over and they go do it, right?
That's right.
And the dealership that got them, clobbered them, right? Because
that's right.
Because they were smarter about what they did.
That's right. That's right. Today it is totally a data play to have that data that's fresh, that's up to the minute. To your point, to predictive data that says here's what these numbers need to look like moving forward, rather than looking in the rearview mirror, which will only get you in trouble today.
Sure.
Especially if your dealership has got that competitive advantage. I mean, your competition has that competitive advantage. Right. You do not. As I said, you're in hot water, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, everybody in the ecosystem's in that in that same space, So you look at your example. You get the dealership, and they're not signed up with some highly competitive lending institution in their market, but they're competing against a dealer who is.
Right.
They don't know what they don't know.
That's right.
So they need tools that provide them the type of insight that helps them manage their business. Right?
That's right.
Every dealer has a business decision to make. Do I want to sign up with this lender, or do I not want to sign up with this lender? Right. But I need to know what my competitors can do. What's the guy up the street got, right?
Sure.
And then you have the same exact type of scenario from the manufacturers and from the lending institutions also, which is we need to look and see what's going on in the marketplace in real time.
That's right.
And how do we position our offerings to where they're competitive?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there's a cost to do that.
And dealers are counting on finance companies and leasing companies to have that and know that. It shouldn't be the dealer driving that. To the lender. It should be. It shouldn't be the dealer saying, "Hey, wake up, dummy! What are you doing here? We're losing deals because you're not paying attention to this. You're not moving these levers as they need to be moved." Right?
Yeah.
Because what'll happen too is you'll have a lender that will come in and say, "Hey, sign us up because take a look at this. What we can do on a Camry, we can get this for 36 months at this number, or 60 months on a finance, or whatever the case might be." And it might look great. It might crush it against your competition that day, that week, that month. Could be totally different next month.
Yeah.
If they don't pay attention to things, you could be $25 higher than anybody else. Of course, you just signed up with them,
Right.
but that's an unfortunate situation. I've seen that done before where, a company will come in and just pat themselves on the back and say, we're the cheapest in this category. And yet that changes in just, 30 days.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you heard on a showroom for the sales guy, you're only as good as your last sale, right?
That's right.
The guy who was number one on the board for the last 3 months, if he doesn't put anything up on the board at all
done.
next month.
Yeah.
So
same thing happens with these.
Yeah. They're tools, right? Everybody's, you go into the shop, they got a toolbox full of all kinds of specialized tools, right?
That's right.
And you use them for the right application.
That's right.
And,
that's right.
And that's what they want too. If you think about as a lending institution, every lending institution's got commonalities with other lending institutions, in that they've got an appetite for certain types of transactions in their portfolio, and they have an aversion to certain ones, right? We have really bad luck with these vehicles in this market with this demographic, so we want to price ourselves out of the market there, right? And if we end up with those, we're going to buy them so cheap because our rates are going to be too high or residuals too low, whatever, that we don't get hurt.
Right.
And there's overlaps everywhere, right? Because you've got lending institutions that says, I love all this type of business because we do really well with it.
Yeah.
And this guy says, I hate it, it's all yours, but over here I'm going to kill you.
Right.
But they have to be able to balance it out, and in order to do that,
that's right.
They got to know what's going on in the market.
That's right.
And so does the dealer, and so does the OEM, and
everybody's got to be working in concert with one another to win that customer over today, right?
Yeah.
It can't be that you've got a lender that is not as in tune with the marketplace at that particular time in that particular market. I know your programs zero right down to the zip code to say, okay, Mr. Dealer, here's what's happening, and lender, here's what's happening in your zip code in your market right now. Right. Not a national scope or a southeast, but here's what's happening right now.
Right.
It's hugely important.
Well, and that's the different lens, right? So if you're a lender and you're figuring out, okay, what's the program look like national average, right? Great, you nailed it, right? But the consumer doesn't care.
That's
what
right.
The consumer cares is what's in it for me, right?
That's right.
How's that going to impact my family?
That's right.
And
the downside too, of this, if this happens, with dealers, is you lose credibility with those consumers. I mean, it doesn't take many deals. You know what it takes just to get to desk a deal, whether it be online today or whether it be in the showroom. You lose that credibility, chances are you'll never see that customer back in your showroom again or on your website, because if you're perceived as higher than the others for whatever, you might, like you said, dealers don't know what they don't know in this case. So if you're perceived by that consumer as, oh no, those guys they charge more payment wise, the leases are higher, whatever, don't go there. They don't go back, and then they also tell their friends don't go there because the cars cost more. And meanwhile, the dealer doesn't even know it.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. When I first started doing this a bunch of years ago, one of my first customers was a Ford dealership. And the GM of the store became a really good friend of mine. And then we ended up signing up a really big Ford store. I'm not going to say names, but they're big, right? And so the GM of the giant Ford store's next door neighbor was a surgeon, and he wanted a new, latest, they had Ford and Lincoln Mercury, one of the latest Navigator or something. So he asked me, he says, can you get me a deal on one? And the guy from the big store said, no problem. Yeah, and I'll give it to you my cost, right? And we won't make a penny, right? He says, okay, cool. So he does. I mean, he literally gives him the whole bag, the rebates, everything. He's selling it to him at a zero deal, right? And
you got to live with this guy.
Yeah, he's my next door neighbor. He's my buddy. I play golf with him, right? So so he leases this, or he quotes this guy a lease, right, at zero profit. And, or his sales manager does, right? He says, just take care of my next door neighbor. So 5-6 days later, this guy's going out to get his mail or whatever, and he sees there's a brand new Navigator in his neighbor's driveway, right? He's like, oh, cool. And he looks and he says, it doesn't have his drive-out plate on it. It's got my first customer's drive-out plate on it. Right? Oh, boy. And he says, so he called him. Right? They knew each other. He says, what'd you do? He says, oh, thanks for sending him to me. I ripped his head off, right? So there was a lender that was $200 a month cheaper than the best Ford program, right? So this guy's next door neighbor goes and gets a payment that's $100 a month cheaper than they quote, and he made over window sticker on the deal.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So you talk about a loss of trust, right? All of a sudden, no, they're not golf buddies anymore. And
that's right.
And it's because he didn't know what he didn't know.
That's exactly right. That has happened to me before as a GM, and I can attest that those things do happen. There's no question about it. You don't know where you went wrong,
Right.
It used to be back in the day, you missed it on the trade. Right. Your used car manager put 12.5 and the guy down the road put 11.5 or whatever, and or whatever the case might be, more money in the deal, and it's just like, what the hell? How'd you miss that one?
Right.
But now with technology, obviously, you gotta nail these things, right?
Yeah, and that's the secret sauce. Yeah. But it's out there for everybody, right?
That's right.
Every dealer now has the ability to get it right because there's tons of great tools out there.
Yeah.
As we watch these incentives and rebates, if they get really, really complex, the dealers who don't stay ahead of it from a technological standpoint, they're going to be in trouble because most dealers struggle with getting it right now. Yeah. And it's not hard now. It's not complex now. But all of them have money in transit because they misapplied a rebate somehow or something. Yeah. And then you got two options, right? You call the customer in and ask them to rewrite, which how well does that work out, right? I know. Or you take it out of the gross. That's right. Which most of them end up losing the profit to keep from upsetting the customer.
That's right. Before we got started today, we were talking about the technology involved, and you brought up a beeper, and this is this is what they're using now.
Don't judge me, people.
Don't judge me.
Yeah, so I was.
Oh, we all had one of those.
Yeah, so I was cleaning out a toolbox a while back, and I saw this, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. And I threw a battery in it, and the thing actually powered up. There's no text in it. It's it's from like. January 2nd of 1999, it thinks it is, right? Wow. So this thing's 20-something years old. Yeah. But I started thinking, you look at your iPhone, and all of us have some kind of a smartphone, right? That's right. And this was the highest evolution of texting. Yeah. Right? That's right. I'm not texting, pagers, right? Sure. We could get text messages on a pager, and that was really, really cool. Yeah. And then all of a sudden this thing came out. And now these things are completely obsolete. That's right. When we start looking at it, if we're not looking at the world through the consumer's lens, we're literally evolving this as opposed to converting to that. That's right. And that's the biggest thing is we got to think differently, right?
There's no question about it. If COVID has given the auto industry anything, it has been an opportunity to hit the pause button, reevaluate everything, go in a different direction, realize that the customer really is in the driver's seat now. Yeah. And we've got to focus all of our energies on serving that customer first and foremost online, so that when we say a payment is a payment, we can live up to that, and of course, but then to remain competitive, and that's where you guys come in, and you're knocking the cover off the ball. I know, because I speak to a lot of your clients, and so many people count on Market Scan as kind of the gold standard out there. In doing this. But so, what do you think about 2022? I mean, here we are, entering another year, and people say it's going to be another great year in automotive.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a crystal ball. I think that we're still going to have lots of challenges with inventory.
Yeah.
The chips are going to come when they come.
Right.
And if we could wave a magic wand, that would happen today. Right?
Sure.
I mean, it's just the world needs it. But I mean, it's not just the automotive industry. I mean, it's car stereos. Everything else is suffering, right?
I know.
But I think dealership profitability is going to be really high, right? Assuming that they can get cars. The used car market is going to get much more difficult because we've gobbled up a lot of the really quality used cars, and they're going to, they'll still come up, right? As leases mature and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But I think that supply is going to be limited. So I think we'll see a continued decline in rebates. I think we'll see higher gross profits, and what I hope we see is, as you mentioned, dealers and lenders and manufacturers and everybody in the ecosystem take advantage of this little bit of a calm before the storm,
right,
and really shore up their capabilities.
Yeah.
And the consumer's in the driver's seat.
Yeah,
and
no question about it.
If we look at the world through the eyes of the consumer,
Yep,
and we build our processes around that,
yep,
when things do open up, it's going to be really good.
Yeah.
And the ones who don't, I think, are going to suffer really bad.
Yeah.
Right now it's like selling, Hondas and BMWs in the late 80s. It's like, whoa, this is great. But all of a sudden, when there's tons of them, then you're actually going to have to compete with everybody else.
Sure.
I
had one
better have your
dealer
house in order.
Made a unique observation, and I could see where he's coming from in this. And he said, Jim, today we look at customers different than we used to prior to COVID. And what I mean by that is that somebody would walk in the door, or somebody would come online, and they would say, hey, right off the bat, I want to be at invoice or $500 under invoice, and I want retention or the absolute lowest rate you've got, and I've already been online and I've appraised my vehicle. In fact, on your website, I want this for the car and what have you. He said it to the point that when you got a new customer, you also all of a sudden you started to almost resent that customer before they even up to their mouth. Like, who's this tough son of a gun that's coming in here to my store, and I've got all these things I've got to pay, the showroom and advertising and salespeople and everything else, and they think they're going to buy the car for nothing. He said all of a sudden that's turned, and now I find myself having this tremendous amount of appreciation for that customer when they call, because now we can make money on them.
Right.
Now we are, the deal is much more in line, or I should say in line for the dealer to make a profit. So now we're like, oh, there's a customer coming in, great, we're going to make money on them, versus cursing them all the way to the curb to go, I can't believe we just sold a $60,000 car and made $1,500,
Right.
It's funny how that just a little bit of a shift in the way we look at customers today.
Yeah, well, it's a big shift, right?
Yeah, it is.
And the most important part is to keep them happy and keep them engaged.
That's right.
Through the entire process.
That's right.
Consistency in messaging, and accuracy in messaging is going to be paramount.
There's
right?
no
Because
question
there's
about
just higher levels of expectation than we had before.
That's right. Rusty West, co-founder and CEO of MarketScan. For dealers that are out there, check it out online. And you guys work with not just dealer groups, but also so many finance companies and captives and such, and knocking the cover off the ball. As I said, you guys are kind of the gold standard out there. So keep up the great work, and we appreciate you coming in here, because you do sit at a very unique position where you're looking at this all of these applications and all of these payments and what consumers are looking for. So we appreciate you coming in and taking the time with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always fun.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick, Pash, Kane, Lewis, Greenfield, Reed, Dawson, Lopes, Rice. The best lineup in retail automotive. CBTnews.com. Subscribe today.